Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Frank Kutka, and I'm going to talk about my very favorite plant relative. And so, welcome to the great adventure. So if you are already a seed keeper, well, we're going to talk about some of our mutual friends, and that should be fun. If you're new to this, I welcome you to the greatest dance you'll ever have in your life, a relationship with this wonderful plant. We're going to, hopefully, I keep track of my time, we'll talk a little bit about the historical background of this plant, and specifically the kind from our area. And then a new project that is supposed to happen at College of Menominee Nation, exploring some of this diversity. And then I would like to finish with some insights from a recent project I did with some SARE funding, with some methodologies that might be useful for future work with some of the other varieties that are bouncing around. First, I'd like to start by remembering the seed keepers. I don't know about you, but I am not the first one who ever grew this plant. It came to me because people were willing to share knowledge and seeds and a lot of encouragement, and that was wonderful. And so I want to remember all of those seed keepers with whom we have interacted, folks we have read about, and all those countless thousands who we know existed, but we don't know their stories, because we are certainly the recipients of their good works.
Is that Carl Barnes over there?
That's Carl Barnes, yes. Mahidewiach in the middle, and Terrell and Brandt, our good friend who recently passed from Six Nations. There are great depths of spiritual connection with this plant, so I want to just mention that. I don't have knowledge of many of these. So if you are one of the corn-keeping tribes, if you have a spiritual connection, develop it, explore it, live your faith. I encourage you to find all the depths of meaning that you can find through these paths. But I'm mostly going to talk about more immediate things that we can touch and see right here across cultures. One amazing thing that's happened in the last 50 years is archaeologists have actually started figuring some things out. About 50 years back, they still aren't exactly sure where corn came from. They're arguing about it with all kinds of wild theories, some of them very reasonable and some of them far-fetched maybe, but at least interesting. And they have now described an incredible motion of people and seeds over thousands of years, starting from Oaxaca and spreading out, not as finished varieties, but as semi-domesticated varieties, way, way back, south and north, and then coming back and switching around. And some of the movements have continued right on past the invasion of Europeans into this spaces. I think it's really exciting. I've often wondered, how did things happen? And they're getting closer to understanding some of this a bit more. And what became of this? What did all of this develop? What's the outcome? Outrageous diversity. So many different people, so many different cultures, so many kinds of corn for specific locations, for specific flavors, for specific relationships with people. These are just some of the racial types they describe from Mexico, but every place has its own groups of corn, whatever they might be. Some people keep many kinds, not just varieties, but many completely different racial types. So how did it get up here, since it's from down there? What do we know about this from what the archaeologists can tell us and the biologists? Well, corn, by whatever name, seems to have come up to the desert Southwest, and it's spent a few thousand years getting used to it, because it's not from there. And it moved, it kept creeping north until it got up into what's currently Colorado. Then it got even further out and about. So how do we get to the Midwest from there? Looks like some small amounts of popcorn were in the area, maybe 2,500 years ago, back during the old agriculture based on some of the small seeded wild grasses and sunflower and squash. It's coming up in that time, a very long time ago, but not very much. By 1500 years ago, it's clearly a very important food crop all over the place, in places you wouldn't even expect, which I'll show you shortly. And by 1200 years ago, northern flint is the type most commonly grown all across the region here along the southern Canada and northern US. Some biologists have recognized that it took some doing to do this, to take this tropical plant and get it adapted to cold and short seasons and all of the rest. So you have to be a good seed keeper to get something to become so well adapted to a place it's not from. And within 1,000 years, it diverged from all the other corn to be very, very unlike any other one. It is just biochemically not the same. Here's some results of a scatter plot based on genetic relationships from a paper a few decades back. The northern flints are way off to one side. Some people describe them as so different from other corn, it's almost like it's a different species. Well, that's astounding. So what do we got? What is this wonderful grain? We'll start west and come east. So there were corn cultures between Colorado and the Great Lakes. Some of their descendants ended up in the Dakotas here. So Nueces, Hidatsa, and Sanish people were corn people. There are also corn moved up into Canada out in the west. The Assiniboine had corn. Some of the refugee Dakota took corn up into Canada. And this corn grows with a lot less water than what you're used to here in most parts of Minnesota or Wisconsin or Michigan. Here is I believe a Hidatsa woman with a small patch along the Missouri River back in the day. There's a lot more corn growing than everyone always thinks. Sometimes people think it's the first time it ever showed up, but it's not always the case. Here is an interesting map from some archaeological work that's done up in Ontario and Manitoba. Corn's appearing on pots in the subarctic areas 1,500 years ago. And it's common by 1,000 years ago. So people were really moving this around. It was somewhat pre-adapted and then pushed even farther and harder. I have read papers about how corn is first introduced by immigrant farmers and Yankees from the east into the western Great Lakes. That's obviously completely false. It was here a long time. And who are all the people? I don't know. This photo is really fun for me. Here is a photograph from Lake of the Woods. So someone's got a crop of corn around Lake of the Woods 100 years back. Here is a photograph you saw previously from a fellow on one of the reservations in northern Minnesota. Obviously, a fabulous crop of corn too. As we head east, we still find lots of corn. So here are some of the ancient garden beds at Menominee. These have been dated back so that they're about from 1200 to 1650 or so. The oldest ones seem like they might be up to 1200 years old. And corn is found in those. Northern Wisconsin, right on up into the UP, hundreds of years ago. When I got interviewed for my job, they dropped this on me, and I said, wait a second, what are you talking about? This is absolutely astounding. This is not the story I've ever heard. And I was so excited, and I've been able to go see these garden beds. They're just out there because they didn't have a lot of tracked vehicles running through that forest. They're still there. But these kind of garden beds were all over the Midwest at one point. If we go east, we find corn all across southern Ontario. And of course, down into New York, a major corn culture there with the Haudenosaunee Confederation. As you go east, there's corn everywhere. Northern Flint, all the way to the Atlantic, all the way up into New Brunswick. This one here is a little Flint variety from New Brunswick. Pretty fast stuff. Southern parts of New England, further down towards Virginia, you still see Northern Flint corn, many different sorts. So apparently the story is up from Mexico into the desert Southwest, sits there a while, slowly spreads into Colorado, and then shoots across the Great Plains to the Great Lakes to the Northeast. Eventually getting down into the Southeast, but that didn't happen as fast. So let's take a look at this fascinating, not like the rest of the corn kind of corn. So northern flints are really fine and leafy plants. They don't look like commercial corn. They have stems that are so thin sometimes, it's amazing that they can hold up what they got. Long, pendulous leaves sometimes. Beautiful stuff. Here are some photographs from some older varieties from a paper done about 50 years ago. And one of my favorite garden photos from my own garden of some corn I got from the Rickards at Tuscarora. Wonderful stuff. You don't see a lot of these in northern flints. These are brace roots. They're adventitious roots that plop out of the lower nodes. Modern corn has a lot of this. Some of the tropicals have a lot of this. Northern flints, you just don't see as much. They don't have as many roots. Now, even with prop roots, sometimes you can blow over. If you're really thin, breaking is really easy. Northern flints are famous for lodging. There's a way to get around that, though. If you grow them in a group with beans, ties it all together. Doesn't fall over. It really fits that system of the three sisters very, very well. However, sometimes out on the open plains with wide spaced rows, heavy rain, easily goes flat. I have seen it happen many times. Another thing about the northern flints that you don't see in the modern varieties so much, tillers, little side shoots coming up from the base. So the clump in the middle there, that's just two plants, but you can see all those little babies coming up from the sides. Northern flints oftentimes have that. Modern corn will sometimes make tillers, but having tillers that have ears at the ends is also not uncommon in some of the northern flint types. Northern flint varieties are not used to southern corn diseases. They've been up in the northern country for over 1,000 years. If you want something that will beat cold, that's what you want. If you want short season, that's what you want. If you want it to be able to take these diseases coming up from Mexico, they've never seen it, or they haven't seen it in a couple thousand years. So they're frequently susceptible to some of these diseases. The taxonomy has been a little bit messy here and there. It's obviously maize, no matter whether it seems like a different species to some people or no. The scientists who concern themselves with these things recognize two racial complexes in our region, a western Great Plains flints and flowers and a northern or eastern or northeastern flints and flowers. They both have thin stalks and few prop roots, low ears and tillers. Usually have flag leaves on the ends of the ears. They differ in adaptation a little bit and height, a little bit by row count on the ears, but not that different in some respects. The western ones oftentimes have a few more 12-row ears. In the east, it's mostly all 8s. But I have a lot of questions about all this. You know, there are some really different looking corns in this region. Some of them are very, very short, tiny little ears. Some are very tall with very high ears. Those are all the same thing? I don't know. And then what about the popcorn that's been around? What about some of those? And does race really exist anyway? I've dealt with a lot of diversity in corn. I don't know where I would draw the line. To me, race is a charming concept, but biologically, there's no edge. You can't draw the line here. This is where it starts or ends. It's even harder in trying to define a species. Well, I'm going to show you the extremes. This is one of the fastest, earliest, tiniest corns of this northeastern group. This is the corn from the Gaspé Peninsula in Quebec. I have grown it at my place, seed to harvest of dry, or at least drying ears, mature ears, 60 days. 60 days. It doesn't produce a lot. If you want corn that's really at the mercy of the raccoons and squirrels and chipmunks, this is certainly it, because those ears are right on the ground. But holy mackerel, is it fast. It's just so impressive. And then you get into some of those varieties from the major corn cultures. And the ears are huge. The plants are gigantic. They're so productive. And all part of the same story of corn coming up and adapting to this cool region. A little bit longer seasoned, but ears are still 8-row. That's the one thing about it. When people in art like to draw corn, they frequently will give you these big chunky ears that look like commercial dent corn or field corn you see. And they'll put some colors on it and say, here, this is indigenous corn. It has colors. Most of the indigenous corn, not everything, but most of it was 8-row corn in this part of the world. And so when people draw the ears, they should be long and thin, whatever colors, of course, that can vary quite a bit, but they usually should be 8-row. But there's a lot of diversity here. Some of it is flinty. The grain is very, very hard. And this has been a very important type in agriculture for over 1,000 years, right on into the 20th century. People are still selling this, growing it commercially. Looks like this. This is a fine variety from Maine, bright and shiny. It looks a lot like flint, especially Knife River flint to me. Slightly translucent, very shiny. You could break your teeth on this, so grind it or do some other preparation first. It is hard. But anyone want to throw out a word for what you see here? Look at all the colors. Yeah, diversity. All the colors of the rainbow, except for orange. Didn't have a lot of orange up this way, but everything else has been around for a long time, enchanting people and bringing beauty to their meals and their gardens. Sometimes northern flint corn is poppable. So here's a variety with very small seeds, and it pops. Plants still look kind of the same. Ears are the same basic type. With one gene different, we now have flour corn. So you have one mutant gene, and now instead of having this hard starch, we have very soft starch. Wonderful for grinding up. It's very easy to grind. Makes wonderful morsels in soups. And floury corns can also be pretty colorful. With a different mutant gene, it's sweet corn. And now when you take it to make boiling ears, you have a little extra time before it gets really starchy and hard. Any kind of color you can imagine, of course, is bouncing around. It's wonderful stuff. Every time you open the husks of any of these, it's like a birthday present. What do I get this time? It's delightful. Here are some examples of northern flints in catalogs from about 100 years ago. So there were several that were really quite popular and impressive. University of Wisconsin was breeding northern flints. I think Minnesota was doing some too. And anyone who had traditionally hadn't lost the seeds by relocation or other assimilation efforts was certainly still growing it as well. It is the basis for a lot of the food sovereignty efforts because this is the corn that people were growing and eating. There are a lot of varieties that were still being recommended by the USDA in the 30s, still includes some of the Flint types, although anything without a asterisk doesn't seem to be available any longer. You can find seeds from the USDA, from seed keeping organizations, and by seed keepers all over the place. Midwest still included a couple, and many of them in the C also group are things that were commercially being sold. Northeast, quite a diversity there. There's still a good number in the USDA collection. And people are really excited about this stuff. This is showing up in fairs. It's still a part of food culture all over the place, heading up towards World War II, and has remained so in small pockets here and there. There's some resurgence out there. The food sovereignty movement is certainly bringing some of these back in a big way. There are some independent breeders who are still working with some of the northern flints and flowers, like Dave Christensen here with his painted mountain corn out in Montana. It's probably the most drought-hardy crop you could grow out that way, corn-wise. So, a beautiful heritage. College of Menominee Nation is hoping to revive connections, bring this to more young people, get seeds out to people, get information, get experiences with this crop so people can see if it has a place in their lives now. So our project is aiming at long-term wellness and helping to see whether or not some of the varieties of corn might be a part of that process. We are working with Lecoutere, Ojibwa University, Michigan State University, a little Traverse Bay Band of Ottawa Indians, University of Vermont, and one of the bands of Abenaki in Vermont. But we are also hoping to less formally reach out and connect with others, because obviously science is nothing if we don't share information and connection at both directions. So we have several overarching aims for our project and specific objectives underneath. The first one was a hope of reviving some old corn seeds and learning how that process works. We did a training with Sheila Black at Grand Valley State in Michigan, where we learned the process of rescuing embryos from old seeds to see how that worked. She is the expert. She's very good at it. And for some old seeds coming out of old storage, if they're not dead, there are some techniques you can use to try and rescue the variety if it won't just normally germinate. And a lot of old seeds won't. They might still be alive, but life is very weak. They can't do it by themselves. So we got permission from our Commission on Language and Culture at Menominee to work on some old seeds and take our students to study this to see if it would be something beneficial someday. We're also going to be training some of our own people and putting out videos and working on a corn club manual, as a matter of fact. So ways that people can take part. As we get videos put together with some of our local experts and our media specialists, share, watch, tell us things you'd like to learn about to give us some ideas what we might work on. I am available. Just throw information my way. I won't argue or complain. I won't say, who are you? I'd love to get suggestions. So please, let me do my job, which is to try to be helpful here. Make use of any that seem appropriate. If it isn't, that's okay. But if they're around, share them about. This is the corn growing 4-H manual from Montana back in the late 20s. All the states where corn was grown used to have 4-H clubs that had corn clubs. Corn clubs started 4-H. And what did these kids learn? They learned why you would grow corn, how you grow corn, how to save seeds, how to show it at the fair. Basic stuff, but things that we don't ever teach anybody anymore. No 4-H manuals have included seed saving since the 40s. But all of these are still around, but with somewhat culturally slanted views and historically interesting language and presentation. So we're hoping to update some of these in case anyone would like to do something like this now, teach kids to save seed and whatnot. So I'm working on a rewrite. Would love to have editorial comments. I would love to see people make their own suggestions. We're hoping to put out a template at some point where people just take it and rewrite it however they like. Because, you know, the purpose isn't to be the font of all knowledge, it's to be helpful. And that's what we're trying to do with this. We're hoping to do a regional participatory evaluation of several flint corn varieties, looking at some nutrient analyses, and then to share some of the seeds and the information at some point. Places where people can collaborate with us on this is, number one, if our money is actually back again, because it's on hold right now, but if we actually get the money, we are hoping to do nutritional analysis on whatever varieties you have so that you will know what your corn's got in it. And then what we would like to do is keep some of the information to generate an average and a range for this kind of corn, but all the specific information would just be for you. We would never use it again. So we're not trying to take or harvest anyone's information, but we would like to be able to use it in this way. So if this is something that's acceptable, if our money comes back, you can send us some seeds, we'll send them to the lab, we'll send you the information, we will keep the data for that, subtract the name, and just share the average with people. None of the specifics. Some of this sort of work has been done. Heather Darby in Vermont has been working on these issues in a big way the last few years. We've been trying to get a project going for a while, so we finally got the big grant. But anyway, here's a little bit of her preliminary information from some of the same varieties. And I just want to point out, let's see if I can get my pointer here. Yeah, there's pointer. There we go. Cool. Still works. Protein. The low protein here on this page is 8. The high protein here, 12.5. There's a lot of diversity there. Some of the old varieties don't have any more nutritional value than any other corn that you've seen. Some of them are amazingly better, which is one reason why our little nightly friends like to come and remove this, because it tastes good. There's stuff in it. For our evaluations, we're hoping to compare a total of 30 varieties at multiple sites and generate some averages, see which of the varieties is the highest, lowest on various things, and just share basic information. We're also going to bring people in at these locations so the community can come in and give us their interpretations on what they see, and just have a good time making a little bit of a community festival out of otherwise just be a variety trial. But variety trials are great exploratory experiences, and I think they're fun to share. What are we looking at? Well, we're going to that same USDA repository that Christina's mentioning. It's amazing what all is in there. There are more than 100 different Northern Flint varieties there, probably closer to 150. We've looked at some. CMN grew out about 60 a few years ago, and some of our partners did too, and from that we're picking out this smaller group. But they're there, and anyone who wants to do research can take a peek. I too would be happy to help if you are struggling to get permission to get some seeds. Of course, we end up having to have some sort of explanation for what's up. Again, some of Heather's early information. She's comparing some preliminary estimates of yield versus maturity. Saltzer's White, one of my faves from Ontario. She also has a look at plant height versus lodging, forms a great big ball, so there's no strong relationship there. Some varieties just like to fall over and some don't. And until you grow them, you don't know. And until you grow them and maybe work with them a little bit, you're not sure if you might be able to overcome it or not. But there's a lot of room to explore. It's kind of fun. We'll be looking at a couple locations in Wisconsin, a couple in Michigan, and one in Vermont. Everyone's going to look at 20 different varieties. Each place will have 5 of their own that are especially interesting. And then we're going to have 5 check varieties to compare them with. And we're going to look at yield, lodging, overall health. Flavor testing will be done, which almost never gets done. But I'm especially interested because I know some of it is astounding to eat. When the Rickard family first sent me some Tuscarora corn, I don't have words to describe it. My gosh, that was good. It was really good. I don't eat dent corn anymore. And we'll look at nutritional quality to find some of the specifics there. Objective 9, we're trying to share the information, so eventually we'll need some help with that. So we're going to have a webinar. Hopefully we can share the link around far and wide. Anyone sees the information, pass it along to anyone who might be interested. And then finally, we have increased a bunch of seeds to use. If anything from our output makes a particular seed look interesting to anyone out there who would like some, we would be happy to help you take a look at it. Whether it's a traditional one or not, we know that a lot of things are in flux. The climate's changing. Some folks aren't really sure if their traditional varieties are going to hang on or no, and so some folks are starting to look at new things. You know, we will not be trying to tell anyone what they need to do, but we will try and facilitate whatever it is you feel you got to try to do. And we will share and increase seeds whenever possible and share our experiences and knowledge. So, I want to make a couple of comments about USDA accessions. One is, it's not all the varieties that were here 100 years ago. When hybrid corn came in, we are so lucky that a few people at the time hung on to their seeds or shared them with university researchers and ended up getting some into the USDA collection. A lot of stuff is extinct. Things that people said were the best ever, it's gone, no longer exists. Of those that got into the USDA collection, some of them are based on 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. They're not all really full-fledged varieties anymore. They are a representation of some of those varieties. And you can't tell until you grow them whether they really got much oomph left to them or not. So what about that? You know, if there's something there and it doesn't really have a lot of vigor anymore because it's a little bit inbred, should you just chuck it? Or maybe there's something you could do with it. So there are some neat old tricks for reinvigorating corn. So this is from a paper in the early 20th century. Collins liked talking to people about corn, about a lot of things. And I just underlined here, the Hopi of Arizona make a regular practice of placing seeds of more than one local variety in each hill with the idea that larger yields can be obtained in this way. So people have known about inbreeding problems for a long, long, long time. And they found ways to overcome them. And those techniques still exist. Breeding on farm was encouraged once by USDA and the universities. And based on this idea, a few farmers and I applied for a farmer rancher grant from SARE. Oh, well, thanks, machine. Let me back that up. We applied for a grant from SARE to explore this possibility of putting different varieties together to make something that was more vigorous than any of the parents originally. So we got the funding, and with some university partners, we tested test crosses. We crossed a number of different varieties with a diverse population, all of them the same way. And then we had them all grown out, and we looked at which ones had the greatest ability to push yield and performance for those. We also looked at nutritional quality. I don't have all the stuff here, but anyway, we looked at a bunch of different things. We took the ones that had the very best yields and we intermated them to see what would happen. And here's the result. This is just commercial type dent corn, but we put that together. You could do this with any kind of corn. This summer, we sent it around to some universities to see what would this variety do. And it was not everything, but it wasn't too bad. You know, it's certainly pretty vigorous. So here are some of our numbers from across the region, from North Dakota to Vermont. This population pretty much bombed. It didn't do really very well at Minnesota or Pennsylvania. It was just sort of an average open pollinated dent corn in Wisconsin. But in the green, you can see that the yields were really quite impressive in some locations. And so I believe we have an unqualified, well, yes, mixing together different varieties can sometimes lead to a very vigorous outcome. University folks were encouraging farmers to do this. Farmers have been doing this for thousands of years. We can still do this now. So if some of these accessions have any potential at all, they don't have to be left there just because they're a little bit inbred and not as yieldy. Perhaps we can make use of them and bring them home, bring them out so they can dance again. So I'm going to officially end my formal blabbing at you here with a great big thank you. Wawanan is how we say thank you at the Menominee Reservation. I have most of the other native languages from Wisconsin represented and a couple of others as well. Thank you so much for listening to me talk about one of my favorite topics and our new project. If you want to get a hold of me, that is my email address for now. I work at the College of Menominee Nation. I would be happy to work with you further on your projects. I would love to hear your commentary and suggestions for our projects. And of course, best to you and all of your corn growing adventures.